I remember when it all started. It didn't feel like a momentous occasion. In fact, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The people around me had a way of making me feel seen, like they truly cared about who I was. They seemed genuine, like the kind of people you could call at 2 a.m. when you were at your lowest. It wasn't just their words, it was the way they looked at me, the way they made time for me, the way they seemed invested in my life. I couldn't have known it then, but this was all part of the plan. A calculated setup disguised as concern. At first, I brushed it off as paranoia whenever I had the smallest doubt. After all, isn't that what we're supposed to do? We're taught to give people the benefit of the doubt, to assume the best in others until proven otherwise. And they made it so easy. They laughed at my jokes, sympathized with my problems, and shared just enough about their own lives to make it feel like a mutual bond. I started to think of them as my safe haven, a place where I could be vulnerable without fear. It was intoxicating, the kind of connection you read about in novels or see in movies, the kind that makes you believe maybe you found your people. The thing about trust is that it's gradual. It doesn't come all at once but builds slowly, layer by layer. Each shared secret, each moment of solidarity added a new layer to this foundation I was creating. I started to open up about things I hadn't told anyone before. My fears, my dreams, the little insecurities that I kept buried deep inside. They were so good at listening, at giving me just the right words of comfort and validation. It made me feel safe, like I had finally found a place where I could belong without pretenses. Looking back, I realized that this was all by design. They knew exactly what to say, exactly how to act, to make me feel like I was the one in control. I didn't see it at the time because it felt so real. I couldn't have imagined that someone would go to such lengths, would put on such an elaborate show just to deceive me. I didn't question their motives, and why would I? They seemed to care, genuinely care, about me. It was easy to believe that we had formed a real connection. It was easy to hand over my trust like it was a gift they had earned. But in reality, they were playing a game. They were laying out the pieces, setting the stage, and I was the one who couldn't see the script. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can wear a mask so well that you forget it's there. I thought I knew them. I thought I was special to them. And I thought that the trust I gave was something they valued just as much as I did. It wasn't until much later that I realized the truth. It was never about me. It was about what they could get from me. How they could use my trust as a weapon in their game. The perfect illusion had been cast, and I was the perfect fool. There's a funny thing about deception. It doesn't shatter all at once. It crumbles slowly, piece by piece, like a wall starting to crack under pressure. I remember the first time I felt that sinking feeling in my gut, the one that whispers something isn't right. It wasn't a big moment, just a small inconsistency, a story that didn't quite add up. I shrugged it off, told myself I was being paranoid. They'd given me no reason to doubt them, and yet that nagging feeling wouldn't go away. It started happening more frequently, little things that didn't match up, moments where their words didn't align with their actions. I'd catch a flicker of something in their eyes, a flash of annoyance, or a moment of hesitation, before they'd quickly cover it up with a smile. I'd ask them about it gently, not wanting to seem accusatory, and every time, They had an answer ready so smooth it was almost rehearsed. They'd laugh it off, call me silly, assure me that I was just overthinking it. You worry too much, they'd say, pulling me into a hug or brushing my hair pert from my face, like I was a child they needed to comfort. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe my past experiences were clouding my judgment, making me see things that weren't there. They were so convincing, so adept at making me feel like I was the problem. I began to silence my own intuition, pushing away the voice inside me that screamed something was off. I told myself that I was just scared of losing them, that I was projecting my own insecurities onto a relationship that was, by all outward appearances, rock solid. But the doubts didn't go away. They multiplied, lurking in the corners of my mind, like shadows I couldn't quite banish. I started noticing patterns, how they'd be so attentive and caring when they needed something from me, but distant and aloof when I needed them. It wasn't obvious, not at first. It was subtle, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't paying close attention. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. It was there, staring me in the face, daring me to confront it. And still I hesitated, because confronting it meant facing the possibility that everything I believed was a lie. It meant admitting that I had been wrong, that I had been fooled. It was easier in a way to keep living in the illusion. It was safer, so I kept quiet, hoping that I was wrong, praying that the feeling in my gut was just a figment of my imagination. Then came the moment of truth, the day when everything I had ignored, everything I had brushed aside, came crashing down around me. It wasn't a slow realization. It was like a switch being flipped. One piece of undeniable evidence, something so blatant it couldn't be explained away. I remember staring at it, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that there was some reasonable explanation. But deep down, I knew there wasn't. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach, the wind knocked out of me, leaving me gasping for air. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the realization that I had ignored my own instincts, that I had allowed myself to be played. They had used my trust against me, weaponized my own vulnerability. And the worst part, they didn't care. When I finally confronted them, there was no remorse, no apology, just cold indifference. They had gotten what they wanted, and I was no longer of use to them. In that moment, something inside me broke. I felt the pieces of my heart, my trust, shatter into 1,000 tiny fragments. I wanted to scream, to cry, to make them feel the pain I was feeling. But I didn't. I just stood there, numb, as the realization sank in. I'd have been nothing but a tool in their game, a disposable pawn they could toss aside when they were done. I walked away that day with a hole in my chest, a wound that I knew would take a long time to heal. I had lost more than just a friend or a partner. I had lost a part of myself, the part that believed in the goodness of people, the part that thought trust was a gift everyone deserved. It was gone, replaced by a deep aching emptiness. And as I walked away, I realized that the game was over. But the consequences, they were just beginning. After the dust settled, I was left with the silence, a kind of emptiness that I hadn't felt before. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was deeper than that. It was the sensation of having the ground pulled out from beneath me and landing in a world that suddenly felt unfamiliar and hostile. I couldn't quite recognize myself in the mirror anymore. The person who had trusted so deeply, who had believed in the goodness of others without reservation, was gone. What stared back at me was someone raw, stripped bare, and more uncertain than ever. In the beginning, I tried to put on a brave face. I told myself I'd be fine, that I just needed time, that I'd bounce back like I always did. But this was different. It wasn't just about healing a broken heart or getting over a bad relationship. It was about rebuilding a foundation that had been shattered, piecing together parts of myself that I wasn't sure I could find anymore. My sense of trust, not just in others but in my own judgment, had been so thoroughly dismantled that I couldn't tell where to start. I would sit in my room, replaying conversations in my mind, dissecting every word, every glance, every interaction, looking for the moment when it all went wrong. I wanted to find the exact point when I should have seen through the act, when I should have known better. It became an obsession, a loop I couldn't escape. I blamed myself for being so naive, for ignoring the signs, for not protecting myself better. It was easier to be angry at myself than to face the deeper truth, that there are people in this world who will betray you without a second thought, who will look you in the eye and lie without a flicker of guilt. I started isolating myself. I didn't trust anyone. Not my friends, not my family. Not even people who had been there for me through thick and thin. I became suspicious of every kind word, every offer of help, every smile directed my way. I was constantly on guard, waiting for the next betrayal, convinced that everyone had some hidden agenda. It was exhausting, living in that heightened state of alert, but I didn't know how to turn it off. My trust had been weaponized once, and I wasn't going to let it happen again. The loneliness was the hardest part. I had always been someone who thrived on connection, on deep conversations and shared experiences. But now I couldn't bring myself to be vulnerable with anyone. The thought of opening up, of letting someone else see the broken parts of me, was terrifying. I couldn't handle the idea of being hurt like that again. So I put up walls thick and high and kept everyone at arm's length. People would ask if I was okay, and I'd force a smile, say I was fine, say I just needed some time. But inside, I felt like I was drowning. I remember one night in particular, sitting on the edge of my bed, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. I felt hollow, like a shell of the person I used to be. I realized I couldn't keep going like this, stuck in this cycle of mistrust and self-loathing. Something had to change, but I didn't know where to begin. How do you rebuild trust when it's been shattered so completely? How do you learn to believe in yourself again after being so thoroughly deceived? I decided to start small. I knew I couldn't dive back into deep connections or place my trust in others right away. So I began with trusting myself, with listening to that small, quiet voice inside me that I had silenced for so long. It wasn't easy. Every instinct felt unreliable, tainted by the memory of my past mistakes. But slowly, I began to tune in, to give myself permission to feel and acknowledge my doubts without dismissing them. I realized that part of the healing process was forgiving myself for being vulnerable, for trusting the wrong people. It wasn't my fault that I had been deceived. It was a reflection of their actions, not my worth. I started setting boundaries in a way I never had before. I had always been someone who gave too much, who wanted to be there for others no matter the cost to myself. But now, I understood the importance of protecting my energy, of being selective about who I allowed into my inner world. It wasn't about building walls forever. It was about creating a space where I felt safe, where I could heal without the fear of being taken advantage of again. I started saying no more often, started prioritizing my own needs over the desire to please others. Rebuilding trust with the people around me was a slow and painful process. There were moments when I wanted to push everyone away, convinced that it was better to be alone than to risk getting hurt again. But little by little, I allowed myself to lean on those who had proven their loyalty over time, those who hadn't given me a reason to doubt their sincerity. It was tentative at first, like walking on thin ice. I'd share a small piece of myself and watch their reactions closely, waiting for any sign that they might betray me too. Over time, I realized something important. Not everyone was out to hurt me. I had been so focused on the betrayal, on the pain, that I had forgotten the good people in my life who had been consistent and kind. It wasn't fair to paint everyone with the same brush just because of the actions of a few. I had to remind myself that trust is a risk, yes, but it's also a choice. It's something you give slowly, in pieces, as people earn it. And it's okay to be cautious, to take your time. Healing wasn't a linear process. There were days when I felt like I was making progress, like I could finally breathe again, without the weight of suspicion on my chest. But there were also days when the memories would flood back, unbidden and unwelcome, and I'd find myself retreating into that dark place where I felt unworthy and foolish. I had to learn to be patient with myself, to accept that setbacks were part of the journey. It was a dance between hope and fear, between the desire to connect and the instinct to protect myself. Eventually, I started to see the world in color again. The grayness that had settled over everything began to lift, little by little. I found myself laughing again, truly laughing, in a way that I hadn't since the betrayal. I found joy in small moments, sunlight streaming through the window, the sound of rain on the roof, a quiet cup of coffee in the morning. These little things became my anchors, my reminders that there was still good in the world, that not everything had been tainted by the actions of a few. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I had changed, grown harder in some ways, but also wiser. I learned that trust is a precious thing, something to be given carefully and thoughtfully. I learned the importance of trusting myself above all, of listening to my own instincts and valuing my own boundaries. And while I couldn't erase the pain of the betrayal, I could use it as a lesson, a stepping stone to becoming stronger, more resilient. In the end, I realized that picking up the pieces wasn't about going back to who I used to be. It was about becoming someone new, someone forged in the fire of experience, someone who knew the value of trust because I had seen what it was like to have it broken. And slowly, cautiously, I began to rebuild, not just my trust in others, but my trust in myself. The consequences of betrayal aren't just emotional, they seep into every part of your life, in ways you don't always anticipate. The first thing I noticed was how differently I started to view the world. Everything had a sharper edge to it, as if the illusion of safety had been stripped away, leaving only the harsh reality. I couldn't walk into a room without scanning the faces, trying to read expressions, wondering what secrets might be hiding behind each smile. It wasn't that I had turned into a cynic overnight. It was more like I had developed a new lens, one that magnified the subtle signs of deceit and dishonesty. At first, I thought this heightened sense of awareness might be a good thing, a shield, a form of protection against ever being fooled again. But soon I realized it was more of a burden. It's exhausting to live like that, constantly questioning the motives of everyone you meet, analyzing their words for hidden meanings, bracing yourself for the next blow that may never come. It wasn't just my relationships that changed. It was the way I interacted with the world. I became more guarded, more suspicious, less willing to let people in. I had to, or at least that's what I told myself. It was survival. I found myself second-guessing everything, even decisions that seemed straightforward. I'd wonder if I was being manipulated, if there was some hidden agenda I couldn't see. The trust that had once been the bedrock of my relationships was gone, replaced by a shaky foundation built on doubt and fear. I'd never realized how much I relied on trust, how it was woven into the fabric of everyday life, until it was ripped away from me. It was like trying to navigate a world where the ground could crumble beneath your feet at any moment. It wasn't just about my relationships with others. It was about my relationship with myself. That was perhaps the hardest consequence to deal with. The loss of faith in my own judgment. I had prided myself on being a good judge of character, on being able to tell when someone was genuine. The betrayal shattered that confidence. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been naive, that I had missed something obvious, something everyone else could see. I started to replay events in my mind, over and over, searching for the red flags I had missed, the moments I should have seen through the lies. It was a form of torture, this constant questioning of my own instincts. I became obsessed with understanding why it had happened, why they had chosen to betray me. I wanted answers, explanation, something that could help me make sense of the senseless. But the more I searched for clarity, the more elusive it became. It was like chasing shadows. Every time I thought I had found a piece of the puzzle, it would slip through my fingers, leaving me more confused than before. There was no satisfying answer, no logical reason that could make the betrayal hurt any less. In the end, I realized that the why didn't matter. It had happened and that was enough. I had to live with the consequences whether I understood them or not. Trust, I came to understand, is not just about believing in others. It's about believing in yourself, too. It's about having the confidence to make decisions, to take risks, to put your heart on the line. When that trust is broken, it's not just your relationships that suffer. It's your entire sense of self. I found myself retreating from opportunities, avoiding situations that required vulnerability or risk. I turned down chances to meet new people, to explore new places, to try new things, all because I was afraid of being hurt again. The betrayal had put a cage around me, and I was the one keeping the door locked. Even the smallest tasks became colored by the shadow of what had happened. I'd catch myself hesitating before answering a text, pausing before agreeing to meet a friend, questioning whether their intentions were pure, or if there was some hidden motive I couldn't see. It was like a scar that hadn't healed properly, One that ached whenever I moved too quickly or let my guard down for even a moment. The smallest gesture of kindness would make me suspicious, and I hated that about myself. I didn't want to live like this, trapped by the consequences of someone else's choices. Over time, I started to notice the ripple effects in my closest relationships. Friends who had known me for years, who had always been a source of comfort, started to feel distant. It wasn't their fault. It was mine. I couldn't let them in the way I used to. I couldn't share my thoughts and fears openly because a part of me was always holding back, afraid that even they might betray me one day. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways. The walls I had built to protect myself were keeping out the very people who could help me heal. It's ironic, isn't it? The consequences of betrayal often fall hardest on the one who was betrayed, not the one who did the betraying. They move on, untouched by the wreckage they leave behind, while you're left to sift through the ruins of your own trust and self-worth. I realized that by holding on to the pain, by letting it define me, I was letting them win. They had taken enough from me already. I didn't want to give them the power to take away my future as well. But deciding to move on is easier said than done. It took time, more time than I ever expected, to start rebuilding. I had to learn to forgive myself first, to forgive myself for being fooled, for trusting someone who didn't deserve it. That was the hardest part, because it meant letting go of the narrative that I should have known better, that I could have prevented it if I had just been smarter or more cautious. I had to accept that it wasn't my fault, that their actions were a reflection of them, not of me. Rebuilding trust felt like trying to build a house on quicksand. Every time I made a little progress, something would trigger a memory or a doubt, and I'd feel myself sinking again. But slowly, I started to notice small changes. I began to trust myself in little ways, choosing to follow my instincts on a minor decision, sharing a small secret with a friend and seeing that trust reciprocated. It wasn't an immediate fix, but it was a start. I came to understand that trust isn't about certainty. It's about taking a leap of faith despite the uncertainty. It's about recognizing that yes, there's a risk of getting hurt, but that's the price of meaningful connection. I had spent so long focusing on the pain of the betrayal that I had forgotten what it felt like to truly connect with someone, to let my guard down and be seen for who I am. The consequences of betrayal are real, and they leave lasting scars, but they don't have to define the rest of your life. In the end, I realized that the power of trust lies in its fragility. It's easy to break, but that's what makes it so valuable. The experience taught me to be more discerning, yes, but also to cherish the moments when I do choose to trust, when I let myself be vulnerable despite everything. It's those moments I've found that make life worth living. Trust is a gamble, and sometimes you lose, but sometimes you win in ways you never could have imagined. And that's the risk I'm finally willing to take again.